So welcome officially to the 7th Annual Clean Energy Education and Empowerment Awards and Symposium. So the first thing is, if you have been wondering forever, since you got a notice about this, what exactly is C3E? It is the 3 E's: energy, education, and empowerment. But for shorthand, we just call this the C3E. So our theme for this symposium is celebrating and recognizing past and present women awardees in the C3E program.
So next on the program, we actually have a short description of some of the things that have been going on at Standford. And I can say without any doubt that we would not be nearly so advanced in sustainability if it were not for our next speaker, Famida Ahmed Bangert, who has been the founding director of Standford's sustainability initiatives and the campus programs around Sustainable Standford. She supports long-term energy infrastructure planning. She designs, implements, and directs assessment and outreach for sustainability programs, and oversees business systems and business and analytics. She chairs our Provost Committee on Sustainability, and also a sustainability working group that cuts across everything from athletics to food to residents to laboratories and so forth. In the past, she's chaired the board of directors of the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education. And she received the 2012 Sustainability Champion Award by the California Higher Energy Sustainability Consortium. Before she was at Stanford, she was at that place across the bay we call UC Berkeley. So please join me in welcoming Famida.
Close to 4:30 and you're all here. I'm already so impressed. My apologies to the next panel. I know you were prepared. I'll keep it very, very short. But first of all, thank you for being here. It's been so amazing to hear your stories and accomplishments. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit about Stanford's carbon story. Lots of exciting things going on, and just focus on a couple of elements in it, and maybe in the process talk a little bit about career journey. But I'm so inspired by all of yours that it may or may not come up. How many of you were at the tour of the Central Energy Facility yesterday? Some of you, yeah. So about a decade ago, the university decided to kind of reinvent its both thought process as well as commitment towards energy, and take a step back and looking at what is really happening with our energy use on campus. Of course, we wanted to be a leader in sustainability and carbon emission reduction. We also wanted to protect ourselves from the volatility of energy market, but we also wanted to do something special and something that would be transformative. So sustainability has, excuse me, many elements, as you know: energy, water, waste, transportation, food systems, but I'll focus on the energy story since we are at C3E. Also in the context that we are today on a campus where all that is true. In about 10 years, many of these things have been possible, and it happened kind of simultaneously with the energy story evolution as well. So I wanted to put this up front for you to see how, while we are working on this energy project, in the meantime, tremendous transformation occurred on the faculty side of Stanford's brand with the interdisciplinary research and education. And today we have about 440 faculty at Stanford who teach on sustainability or sustainability-related topics. That's actually a really high number for those of you who are familiar with research institutions. And about 1,000 courses. So I always mention that first, no matter whether I'm telling our energy story, wastewater, et cetera. So back to energy. We looked at what was actually happening on campus in terms of our actual energy use. What was our heating demand? What was our cooling demand? What was our electricity need? And prior to that, we had a cogeneration facility that was serving us well for about 25 years, but it was going to come to the end of its natural useful life in 2015. So about 2009, 2008 is when we started to look back at the data. You know, when all else fails, go back to data. We went back to what was the true story. And after a lot of investigation and data crunching, it came down to this: our campus had this unique heat recovery potential. Looking at our energy use 24/7 over a 365-year span over 3 years, we saw this amazing chart that we could actually be thermally almost self-sufficient, which then made us wonder, do we really need a combined heat and power facility, or do we separate our power and heat? And that was the beginning of the end, so to speak, of our cogeneration. Fast forward, we ended up moving away from cogen and started our heat recovery facility, which some of you toured yesterday. Today, our electricity comes from a combination of direct access, our own solar generation station, and just yesterday, we announced that we're going to open a second solar generation station in Central California, which is going to make our portfolio of electricity 100% from renewable sources. Thank you. And on the thermal side of the story, we are 88% self-sufficient, I like to call it, because we are extracting heat from our chilled water loop, storing it real time in our thermal storage facility, which is a gigantic hot water boiler. In this photo, it's that pretty silver tank. And then repurposing it to meet the thermal need of the campus. It sounds pretty simple in retrospect, but it's really a story that we stumbled across the more and more we looked at the data. So the lesson here is that don't take status quo, right? If there's a challenge and there's a transformation to be happen, really have to look back on what is the real demand and what level of flexibility and optimization we could focus on in order to come up with a solution that's scalable. Not the biggest solution necessarily, but one that's just right, but also fully and flexibly connected to the rest of the state or rest of the grid systems out here. So here are the high points, and I know my talk says that I'm going to talk about good business, right? Those of you who are following the agenda, at what point is she going to talk about good business? So it's the last point over there. With our energy transformation, today our greenhouse gas emissions have been reduced to 68% and soon to be 80% because of the new solar station that's going to make our electricity 100% from solar power. Our water, freshwater, potable water use in a drought-prone state of California, that's reduced by 18%, so that's an important number to us. But the last point, business case, which is my end note, so to speak, this is my favorite chart, and I know you can't read it, and that's okay. But I'll tell you why it's my favorite chart. College, I was an econ major. I didn't really study environment at the time, but I had a hunch for it, and I made up my own major, environmental sciences, at Smith College in Northampton, Massachusetts. And at that time, they didn't really have an environmental sciences minor or major at the time. Then I went into financial services as my first job out of school. Still had a passion for environment, didn't work in it, but I could crunch numbers and I could kind of make financial sense out of everything. And then I switched finally, once I had my moral crisis, to the sustainability career, and grad school was the path. After graduate school, my thesis was on how big institutions can go through tremendous transformation and move towards carbon neutrality. And that was the right thing at the right time. AB 32 was coming into California, and everything just worked out. I went to Cal, did that for a few years, established their climate action program, and Stanford happened 10 years ago. But this is my favorite chart, because here, finally, my education, my passion, and my proof to show that this carbon reduction could work for a gigantic campus, an institution, and a brand, and a model that everybody looks up to could work. It's called the bars and bubbles. So the bars basically show the costs, and the different bubbles are the different criteria, right? In any complex decision, you have multi-criteria decision. And it's a series of options. At Stanford, we love to vet options. It started with 18 options, this lists 10, but it shows a progression of what it is to have fossil fuel-based technology, which is what cogeneration was. We were burning natural gas to produce electricity and steam, but it's really hard to get the CE out of CH4, no matter which way you slice the emissions inventory, all the way to heat recovery, electrification of the system, and then once you have that, you can bring renewables in. In this optionality, the arrows basically show that we were able to create the business case for something that otherwise looked like it would have an enormous upfront investment, and it did. But it was the lowest cost option compared to the net present value calculations of all the others when you actually look at the multi-benefit of a decision criteria. Your GHG reduction, your water reduction, your immediate capital cost, your long-term maintenance costs, and of course, openness to future technology. So my favorite chart, which is hard to read, this is something our trustees really looked over and over again to make such a dramatic transition towards something that otherwise was a tried, proven, tested technology. Why not retrofit that and move on to a completely different system? But just wanted to underscore this point about business case on how important it is to be able to bring it all together, much on the climate action, sustainability. At the end of the day, the programs that actually move forward and get funded and get done are the ones that are able to show the business case over a long period of time. So through this project, we learned a lot. We learned a lot to collaborate as a community on campus with our faculty, our students, and our various departments. And I just want to end saying this, that Stanford's one of those unique campuses where we talked about interdisciplinary study in the classroom, but have also become very, very interdisciplinary and action-oriented and really looking at university as a living laboratory, a living city, a test bed for the many ideas that we preach in the classroom. And we're able to do much of this in action. And being part of this particular conference today with all of you has made so much of this become real for those of us who work on energy and sustainability. So thank you very much for your attention, and I return the podium back to our next panel.